A filthy rich teenage boy decided to drink and drive, crashing his car and ending the lives of multiple people. While normally this would end with a hefty prison sentence, this boy was too rich to go to jail, said to suffer from affluenza. And because of that, his life only continued to go downhill. Right now, I would like to thank the sponsor of today's video, Incogni. This is because lately I've been trying to find someone who can remove all of my data from marketing databases that I never consented to be on. It's very hard to find a solid, definitive list of these companies that take this data and spread it all over the internet. There have also been numerous data breaches from different companies over the years that have been leaking out and only really adding to the problem. Requesting to be removed off of all of those could take you years to do manually. That's where Incogni comes in. You can just make an account on Incogni and they will send a data protection law compliance request to all of these different companies and demand that they remove all of your data from these different companies' databases. In-app, you'll get a dashboard that will show you the day-by-day progress in getting your data out of the hands of these different companies. They'll even deal with any objections from their side. Not only do companies get your information so that they can market off of you, they also get as much data as they can to build a customer profile of you and sell it to other companies as well, who will use it however they please. They can get your names, aliases, social security number, usernames and passwords, and even your physical home address and specific online activity. It's pretty easy to see how that could go bad very quickly. You'll notice that we've had a lot of different cases related to stalking on this channel. The different people look up websites that are all over the place at this point will basically take your information and sell it to whoever is willing to pay for it. This can lead to all sorts of stalking, harassment, identity theft, and even scams. Someone could even look up your license plate while you're on the road and find out who you are. Not only that, but these websites will often link you to your different family members on their databases. Incogni's easy. Just make an account, give them the right to work on your behalf, and let them get to work. So take back your personal data with Incogni. Just use my code DIRETRIP, all caps, down in the link in the description below to get 60% off an annual plan. Incogni is available risk-free for 30 days, so there's really no harm in trialing it out. And now, on to the content. Affluenza is a word that not many people had ever heard of before this famous trial. Most people only know the subject of today's video as being that kid who got off scot-free for his crimes because he was supposedly too rich to understand consequences. Well, what isn't really widely known is that the story didn't end there, not by a long shot. So let's start back at the beginning. Our story begins with the marriage of Fred and Tanya Couch. Fred founded and ran a metal roofing company called Kleber and Metal Works in 1986, while Tanya worked as a nurse. Over time, the couple became exceedingly wealthy, with a net worth in the millions. In 1997, they had their son, Ethan Couch, and all seemed to be well to the outside world. Well, it seemed better than well, actually. It seemed like they had the perfect nuclear family and all the money in the world. The reality is, things were pretty dark behind the scenes. Fred has since described his marriage to Tanya as a mistake from the start, saying that she was addicted to pills and often threatened self-harm to get her way. Tanya, on the other hand, said that Fred was both physically and verbally abusive, even threatening to burn their house down in anger. In fact, one day in the early 90s, Fred was pulled over for driving drunk. When the police officer attempted to talk to him, Fred flew into a rage and told the man, "I make more in a day than you make in a year." Ethan grew up surrounded by both a dysfunctional family and incredible amounts of cash. Growing up in Burleson and attending the Anderson private school, it wasn't too long before Ethan started getting into some trouble himself. At the age of 13, he drove himself to school one day. The principal obviously saw this as a problem and contacted his father. Fred responded to the principal by threatening to buy the school. He then pulled Ethan from that school and threw him into a co-op school in the nearby town of Watauga until he was 15 years old. From that point on, he enrolled into a community college. Things didn't really get any better after leaving his original school. They only got worse. Oftentimes, Ethan's bad behavior would involve either alcohol or cars. When he was 15 years old, he was caught in a parked pickup truck with a nude, unconscious 14-year-old girl drunk out of his mind. He was arrested and charged with both minor in consumption of alcohol and minor in possession of alcohol. He pled no contest, being hit with a sentence of probation, an alcohol awareness class, and 12 hours of community service. While Ethan had his crimes, his parents had racked up quite a few charges themselves. Surprisingly, or unsurprisingly, aside from a few small fines, all charges ever pressed against Fred had been dismissed. In 2 of his cases of theft, the charges were dropped after he paid a pretty substantial sum of money in restitution. In one of the cases, the multi-millionaire used a fake check to buy $21 worth of gas. In another, he used a similar strategy to swipe a $46 pair of shoes. In the first case, he paid $274 in restitution and $830 in the latter. At one point, he was charged with evading arrest, but this charge was also dropped. He also had numerous traffic violations related to speeding, drinking, and driving without a license. He wasn't punished for those beyond small fines. At one point, the 2 parents got divorced, but they soon remarried. On a more serious note, he was once arrested for assaulting Tanya. According to court records, he caused her injury by striking her on or about the face with his hands, causing Tanya to fall, and by grabbing her on or about the neck with his hands, scratching her neck. When it came to that charge, Tanya submitted a sworn affidavit of non-persecution, opting not to press charges, leading to that case being dismissed as well. Tanya was no stranger to the police herself, though. Similar to Fred and Ethan, she had been arrested on a number of driving-related offenses. She has been charged with reckless driving and has been accused of running other drivers off the road in anger. For doing that, she was hit with a $500 fine and 6 months of community service. She has also been stopped for speeding and not making her kids wear seatbelts numerous times. It's very clear that Fred and Tanya's attitudes really rubbed off on Ethan. According to a psychologist who evaluated him, Ethan never really learned how to genuinely apologize. He said, quote, "The teen never learned to say you're sorry if you hurt someone. If you hurt someone, you sent him money." Ethan's home life was just as weird as his driving situation. He was allowed to drink at home from a very young age, partaking quite a bit from when he was as young as 13 years old. His mother Tanya was fairly obsessed with him, doting on him often. She even pulled a separate bed into her bedroom just so the 2 of them could sleep close to each other. Even when Ethan got in trouble for drinking and driving, she never punished him for it. Ethan got to the point where he would often host wild parties on his family's property. He got quite an ego, telling people straight up, "I'm Ethan Couch, I can do whatever I want." One day, the usual party was getting more out of control than normal. One teenager who attended the party and met Ethan for the first time said of the event, "Ethan lived in this big place with a long winding driveway that went all the way around to his backyard, which had a large pool in it. When we arrived, the first thing he did was jump in the pool with his clothes on, rip off his shirt, then start downing a big bottle of vodka. He was really knocking it back. He must have drunk about 6 or 7 shots in one go. That set the tone, and from then on he was just boasting and trying to impress us about how much he drank and how much he partied. There was no furniture except for a big couch, a widescreen TV, and his Xbox. It definitely looked like the kind of place a teenager would live in." Ethan would then invite that boy to another party in 3 days. On the night of June 15th, 2013, things would get truly crazy. Ethan was now 16, and neither his ego nor his habit of drinking and driving had gotten any better. After all, he had never been punished. He had no reason to change his ways or do any better. In his mind, getting in trouble wasn't a real risk. There was no reason to hold back, and so he didn't. Ethan and 6 of his friends drove over to a local Walmart to get some beer. Given that they were too young to buy it, they simply just stole it instead. They hopped back into Fred's Ford F-350 truck and sped back to the house, going 70 miles per hour in a 40-mile-per-hour zone. Upon arriving back, Ethan bragged about his skills as a thief and passed the beers around to his friends. Some of the people at Ethan's party that night were meeting him for the first time, and their impression of him was nothing but strange. According to one of them, when he first arrived, he was maniacally laughing as he shot Roman candles at his guests. He said, "He did it out of nowhere. He told them to start running. I would never do that to anyone. He was trying to get the party going by shooting at someone." Another first-time guest described Ethan as, well, the douchebag. He said, "He acted like a douchebag, like, this is my turf, I do what I want. He's definitely that guy. He drank alcohol like no one else. I've seen teenagers drink alcohol and some gag. He does it like it's nothing." After playing beer pong and taking shots, for some reason a group of the boys decided to hop into the back of Ethan's vehicle and go on a drive. Some climbed into the passenger seat, while others got into the bed of the pickup truck. Many of the other kids told Ethan that he was way too drunk to drive, but nevertheless they followed his lead. One of the kids mentioned being impressed by how rich Ethan was, taken in by his attitude. Several of the other kids asked Ethan to give them the wheel instead, but each and every time he refused. While Ethan was driving his dad's truck at 70 miles per hour down that country road, a few other people were out and about. On Burleson Retta Road, a woman named Brianna Mitchell's SUV had broken down on the side of the street. A woman named Holly Boyles, along with her daughter Shelby, came out to give her some help and get the car going again. Soon after, a local youth minister named Brian Jennings pulled his truck over to see if he could lend a hand. It wasn't long before Ethan came peeling down the street. As you might expect, he lost control of the car, skidding off the main road and slamming into the SUV, Brian Jennings' truck, and all 4 of the people standing there. Brian's truck was also sent out into the road, hitting a Volkswagen Beetle that was driving by. Ethan's truck flipped over and rolled into a tree. All 4 of them, Brianna, Holly, Shelby, and Brian, were killed on impact. They had been hit so hard that they were thrown up to 180 feet away. Several of the teens riding in the back of Ethan's truck were also thrown from the vehicle and out into the street, leading to one of them suffering a serious brain injury, left unable to speak or move from that point onward. Luckily, the 2 kids in the back of Brian's truck survived, as well as the couple driving the Beetle. Ethan, a bit bloodied but otherwise okay, climbed out of the wreckage of the truck. Cocky and unfazed, he told the other passengers of his truck, "I'm Ethan Couch. I'll get you out of this." It wasn't long before the police and the ambulances were called. Several of the parents of the teens in the truck were phoned and informed of what had happened. The mother of the boy who had been paralyzed was told simply, "We have your son and he's being taken to the hospital." This mother ran out to the hospital as fast as she could and was met by several other concerned parents there, waiting for answers. All of the parents gathered up and began talking, all except Fred and Tanya, Ethan's parents. They stood off to the side on their own, refusing to engage with the others. However, it seemed this wasn't out of shame or embarrassment, it was out of pure arrogance. One parent said, "They were standoffish with us, probably because they didn't want to speak to any of us. They probably think they're better than us, for one thing. That's what money does to you, I think." Another said, "They were acting like snobby assholes, standing outside and smoking the whole time. They just kept smoking alone and didn't want anything to do with us." 3 hours after the crash, Ethan's blood alcohol level was finally measured. Even hours later, he blew a level of 0.24, 3 times the legal limit for adult drivers. In addition, he was found to test positive for marijuana and diazepam. Ethan, much to his dismay, wasn't getting out of this like he told his friends. He was arrested and charged with 4 counts of intoxication manslaughter and 2 counts of intoxication assault. When it came to the trial, Ethan entered a plea of guilty. The Tarrant County prosecutors were seeking a maximum sentence of 20 years imprisonment, but it wasn't clear if that was going to happen. This was due to the claims of a psychologist hired by Ethan's defense, a man named G. Dick Miller, and the statement he would make that would go on to take the United States by storm. Miller told the court that Ethan was the product of what he called affluenza. Affluenza is not a syndrome or a mental illness, but instead a social condition. It is the condition of being blinded by wealth, to put it simply. The psychologist testified that Ethan was unable to understand the consequences of his actions because his parents had always taught him that wealth buys privilege and that, if you do something bad, all you have to do is pay your way out of it. In a very surprising turn of events, the state district judge, Jean Boyd, actually agreed with the defense. Instead of sending Ethan to prison, she decided to instead give him 10 years of probation and send him to a swanky, country club-style rehabilitation center called Newport Academy. Newport Academy is described as an upscale residential treatment center in Newport Beach, California, one that costs more than $450,000 a year to attend. Fred agreed to pay for the treatment. Many people around the United States, and the whole world to an extent, felt that this ruling was really a sign of the times. They felt that Ethan had only escaped justice due to his family's wealth, and that the term affluenza was nothing short of ridiculous. They lamented that if a poor kid had done the exact same thing, he would probably be locked up for a fairly long time, maybe even his entire life. And, well, as it turns out, they were right about that. Several critics pointed out that the district judge, Jean Boyd, had just given a much harsher sentence to a 16-year-old drunk driver, Eric Bradley Miller, who killed only one person. She sent him to jail for 20 years, even telling him, "The court is aware that you had a sad childhood. I hope you will take advantages of the services offered by the Texas Youth Commission and turn your life around." Despite the fact that Eric had only killed one person and was barely over the legal blood alcohol level, he was hit with the maximum sentence. She even noted that Eric had a troubled upbringing, similar to how she blamed Ethan's parents for what he had done. In the end, the only real difference between the two boys was that Eric was poor and Ethan was rich. It later leaked that Ethan was attending a rehab center called the North Texas State Hospital in Vernon, Texas. Despite the hospital normally costing $715 a day per treatment, somehow Ethan's family got away with paying only $1,170 a month for his stay there. It turns out that this amount was the maximum allowed on their payment schedule, according to the hospital. Relatives of the crash victims came out to protest Ethan's light sentence and point out the lack of remorse he had for what he had done. The Tarrant County District Attorney's Office asked a juvenile judge to send Ethan to jail on 2 counts of intoxication assault. That, however, would not come to happen. Eric Boyles, husband and father of 2 of the victims, said, "Had he not had money to have the defense there, to also have the experts testify, and also offer to pay for the treatment, I think the results would have been different." 5 different civil lawsuits were filed by the family members of the victims over the course of about a year against both Ethan and his father and his business, due to the truck having been a work truck. The parents of the teen, who was paralyzed, filed their own lawsuit as well. His medical expenses had costed $600,000 by that point and could skyrocket into the millions if he continued to need around-the-clock care. 5 of the 6 lawsuits were consolidated in January of 2014. All 5 eventually settled out of court over the next year. For now, it was all over. The victims were gone and Ethan was free. All Ethan really had was his probation, which forbade him from drinking. As long as he was able to abide by that, he was likely able to live his life completely free as if nothing had ever happened. Well, he couldn't even manage that. By the end of 2015, only a few months after the final lawsuits had settled, Ethan was back up to his old hijinks. He was seen at a party, getting drunk and playing beer pong as if nothing had ever happened. Given that, by this point, he was pretty widely hated, someone took a video of him and uploaded it to Twitter. The authorities viewed the video and confirmed that the young man in question did appear to be Ethan. Given that drinking was a direct violation of his parole, he could realistically face resentencing. If that were to come to happen, he could face up to 10 years in jail. The police urged his parole officer to reach out to him, but it's likely Ethan had seen the video on Twitter and he was ducking all of his calls. The police were left with no choice but to issue a warrant for his arrest. Ethan and Tanya saw the writing on the wall. Not only that, but Tanya was getting more than a little tired of Fred by this point. Tanya withdrew $30,000 from the bank and told Fred, "You'll never see us again," before fleeing. The police couldn't find Ethan or his mother. Both had completely vanished. The 2 were reported as missing while an all-out manhunt began. The search for Ethan and Tanya soon became a federal matter, with the FBI, the U.S. Marshals, and other agencies coming to participate in the hunt. They even offered a $5,000 reward for information about Ethan's whereabouts. During their investigation, the authorities came to believe that Ethan, now 18, had fled with Tanya, now 48, in their black Ford pickup truck. After hundreds of leads, they were led to believe that the 2 had likely fled to Mexico. The Tarrant County Sheriff, D. Anderson, said at a press conference, he continues to believe that the law doesn't apply to him, which is how he was raised. If he has enough money, he can get out of it. It wasn't too long before Ethan and Tanya were discovered living in an apartment in Puerto Vallarta out in Mexico. Mexican authorities cooperated with the FBI in order to track them down. Soon enough, CCTV footage of the 2 were blasted all over the news, seen buying chicken and other small items at a shop in Mexico. The 2 were arrested, and despite doing their best to fight deportation, it wasn't going well for them. Tanya was deported back to the United States on December 30th, thrown on a flight to LAX. When she touched down in California, she was arrested by the police on a felony charge of hindering apprehension of a felon. She was held on a $1 million bail until she was transferred back to Tarrant County, where the judge dropped it to $75,000. She was able to pay that fairly quickly and walk free once again. Ethan was able to fight his deportation for a little while, instead being sent to a detention facility in Mexico City. Ethan, eventually, after experiencing this place, decided to stop his fight and accept his deportation. He was flown back to the US on January 28th, roughly a month after his mother, to be transferred from his original juvenile case into the adult court system. He was all set to remain in jail in the United States while the authorities figured out what to do with him. Tanya started working as a bartender, an environment that wasn't going to work well with her probation. It wasn't too long before she violated that probation by failing a drug test. It seemed that her addiction to pills had come back with a vengeance. She was in and out of court continuously from that point onward, eventually racking up 6 third-degree felonies. Given that she withdrew so much money to help Ethan flee to Mexico to avoid jail, she was charged with money laundering. However, that charge was eventually dismissed. She was charged on a felony conviction of attempting hindering the apprehension of a known felon, though, and sentenced to 180 days in jail. She was given credit for time served and released once again. Ethan, at his first hearing, didn't say a word. His attitude once again angered the families of his original victims. In particular, MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, wanted to throw him into an adult jail and strongly advocated for it. The Tarrant County District Attorney, Sharon Wilson, told the public, "Rest assured that in the days and months ahead we will do everything we can under the law to hold him accountable for what he's done." Ethan's case was successfully transferred to the adult court system in February of 2016. It was decided that he will remain on probation until late 2024. Ethan was then sentenced to 4 terms of 180 days in jail to be served back-to-back, amounting to 720 days, one for each of the victims he had previously killed. All while this was going on, Ethan's father Fred was getting into some good trouble of his own. He had already gotten in trouble with the cops for choking his girlfriend, but again in this case the charges were unceremoniously dropped. He wasn't content stopping there, though. Things got more heated when, one night, the police were called out to a house on the 4400 block of Mackey Drive, hearing that a man there was disturbing some residents and claiming to be a police officer. That man was none other than Fred himself. When they confronted him, he said that he could prove he was a cop because he had, quote, police stuff in his car. He pulled out what appeared to be a badge from a small town nearby, so for the time being, the police let him go. However, they couldn't quite let the strange encounter go and kept digging. They found that the fake police officer was none other than Fred Couch, the multi-millionaire owner of Cleburn's Sheet Metal and the father of the notorious Ethan Couch. A warrant was issued for his arrest. Shortly after, he was caught, arrested, and charged on account of false identification as a police officer, misrepresentation of property. Fred once again got off by posting his $2,500 bond and walking free. Soon after, he was sentenced to probation. But even if he filed that probation, his sentence would only be a maximum of 120 days. Ethan was now in jail, finally behind bars, albeit with a shorter sentence than many felt was deserved. While he was in, a man named Tim Williams, a chaplain within the family court system in Tarrant County, began to visit him. Tim specialized in helping teens with anger issues, hoping to see what he could do with Ethan. He talked to him for 18 months, feeling that he was completely wasting his time. He said, Ethan just oozed arrogance. However, after many talks, Tim was surprised to see Ethan finally show a bit of regret, or at the very least, some defeat. Ethan told him, "I don't want to scam the system anymore. I don't want to figure out how I can get around my probation. I just want to do what I need to do." Tim was astonished, feeling that Ethan might finally realize the gravity of what he had done. Tim told the courts, "I believe he is genuine in what he says." Ethan was released from jail on April 2nd, 2018. As a condition of his release, he was required to wear a GPS ankle monitor, wear an alcohol detection patch, submit to a regular drug test, and stick to a strict 9 p.m. curfew. While he is permitted to drive, he has a video-equipped interlock system in his car that will prevent him from starting the car without a breathalyzer. The family of the teen that Ethan left paralyzed came to speak out for the first time in a long time about their grief, saying, "People say we have to die to go to hell. To me, I've already been there." While the mother hugged her son, she let the boy's brother speak. He said, "I told the old judge, I told the new judge, and I told Ethan Couch and his father and his mother, I told all of them, y'all won. Take a look. You have not gone to my house to see what we have to change, to see what we do every day with my brother in order for him to stay stable, to keep breathing." Mothers Against Drunk Driving were heavily critical of Ethan's release, calling it a grave injustice, saying, "The 720 days Ethan Couch served for his crime showed that drunk driving homicides still aren't treated as the violent crimes that they are. We will be watching, because this case brought to light that there is so much more work to be done to hold drunk drivers accountable." On March 18, 2019, the judge allowed Ethan to remove his GPS monitor for the first time, but the other conditions of the parole remained unchanged. This is where Ethan was caught, proving once again that he had not changed. In January of 2020, he was rearrested after failing his drug test, testing positive for THC. But he was successfully able to argue that the positive result came from legal CBD oil, not from marijuana, and was released only 1 day later. Fred Couch continued to get into trouble himself. He was once again arrested and charged with assault after choking his girlfriend once again. However, despite all that has happened, Fred continues to prosper. His company, Cleburne Sheet Metal, continues to perform as well as ever, having annual sales of over $15 million. He also continues to live in the family's mansion. Tanya, though, isn't doing too well. She is now a broke, jobless felon who was left with no choice but to move in with her family. Ethan Couch's probation ended on December 10th, 2023. He is now completely free. It's unknown what kind of life he is living now, but let's hope that it doesn't involve alcohol. Time will tell whether or not we will see him again on this channel. Once again, thank you for watching my video. If you found it interesting, please give it a like, it really helps me out in the algorithm, and hey, feel free to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. Just recently, by popular demand, I've got my own merch store. There's a couple of designs there, and I'll be getting some more pretty soon, so feel free to check it out. I've also started up a podcast with 4 of my friends called the NBR Podcast. If you like this channel, I'm sure you'll like that one too. If you want, go ahead and follow me on social media, as if anything were to ever happen to this channel, that would probably be the only way you'd ever hear about it. I also really appreciate when people follow me on Patreon. There you can get videos early, ad-free, and uncensored. Channel memberships are up too, and you can get the same benefits there as well. Once again, this has been your host Kyle. Thank you, and good night.